Hey everybody, and welcome to a new video where I'm going to be walking you through the different types of profiles that I have on my chart and how I have them set up. So if you're ever looking at my charts, there's three types of profiles that I use. And like I said, in this video, I just want to break down for you kind of briefly where I have them on my charts, what exactly I have them set to, and then I'll talk to you about what I'm using that information for. Okay, so we can go ahead and just jump straight into it. Looking at the charts, the first thing I want to introduce you with is the composite profile, the intraday profile. So this is probably the most common thing to really observe. We have two different variations here. This is a day that's still forming. So this profile is daily, and this is in the process of being built out. And then over here, we have an intraday profile that is completed and that is done. Now, an intraday profile, the way that I have these set up is they're set to start and to end with the session. So when the session ends and when the session closes, that profile starts and that profile ends. This does not include any overnight action. So what this looks like for the S&P is I start it at 9:30 Eastern time, and then I end it at 4:15 Eastern time, PM and AM, respectively. Now, when I'm trading futures contracts, something like the ES, it's open almost 24 hours a day. But the underlying product, the 500 companies that make up the Standard & Poor's and that the ES contract is based on, those companies have a very specific start and stop time. They have a beginning and they have an end. And so what I'll do with a product like the S&P is my intraday profiles just include the proper pit session to pit close, open to close on the pit session. And then everything else in between, I do track and I have different profiles for that. But what I'm looking at every day on the intraday profile that you'll see here, that you see being built out, that information starts and stops the way I've just described it, okay? Now, another important thing to understand is I'll keep this on my trigger chart. A lot of my other charts will have intraday profiles on them, but the main chart that I'm really looking at this for is my trigger. Now, this trigger chart is very drilled in, it's very noisy. There's specific things that I'm looking to take from this chart, and it has some real limitations, so where I'm not really drilled in just looking at this chart all day long, but at very specific times, I'm very focused on what's happening. So important things to keep in mind about this, when we have an intraday profile that has a start and a stop and it's just for one session, once it begins, as it's growing, all this information is changing. So especially early in the day, I'm not leaning that heavily on the information here. I'm not paying that close of attention to where high and low volume areas are, or even where value area is necessarily. There's really a few very specific things I want to know about. And beyond that, I'm taking this information and I'm aware of it, but I'm not really doing that much with it. More of what's very important to me, especially early in the day, is how the current action is responding to the previous profile. There's a lot of information there that's very important to me. But if you ever have an intraday profile that's just starting and it's stopping with a day, especially early in the session, don't ever get too drilled into what that profile is telling you, because that information is changing and it's not that reliable yet. Later in the session, and then especially once it's done, there's a lot of things that we can do with it, but early on, it's not necessarily all of that important, okay? So this is my intraday profile, and this is how I have it set up. If you'd like, actually, I can see you, I can show you how exactly I have it set up. You can maybe make this screen larger if you'd like, but I'll just kind of walk through a couple of the important things. One of the key things, especially if you're using Sarah, would be the multiple profiles from start to end time. And then the start time is set to 9:30, the end time is set to 4:15. A couple of these things are just going to be really preferential things. I do have my volume bars aligned to the right. I think a lot of times they're not. It's a preference thing that I really like to see it that way. And this is really just how I have the other settings built out. A lot of these have probably been tweaked from the way they might become as default. So you can always check back and look at those if you're interested. And that's how I have my intraday profiles set up. Now, the second type of profile that I have is what I call a micro composite. A micro composite profile is if I ever take an intraday profile and another intraday profile and put them together, that makes a micro composite. So in this case, there's 4 days right here, and I'm drawing one profile around all 4 of these days. So that includes, and this is what makes up this, which is a micro composite. Now, the micro composite on this side, there's the main time that I'll draw these is when the market is in balance. We kind of go through these periods of time where we're in balance. And then during those times, I want to draw a micro composite all around this. So what we've done, the market was kind of doing our thing up in here, and we had a very large gap to the downside. Once we took that gap to the downside, we really spent some time balancing out here. Trying to get lower, not doing a good job. Trying to get higher, not doing a good job. Trying to get lower, taking those prices back. We just spent some time balancing out after a big gap to the downside. So as that balance started happening, I drew a micro composite around it. And that micro composite would have started back here on that second day. I would have included it as the third day went on, and as that fourth day happened, I would have just kept including it. And as long as we hold balance, I'm going to keep that micro composite going. There's a lot of information that I can get from this, of understanding where key levels are and really kind of just seeing what's going on inside of that balanced area. Very important to the way that I trade. Now, this micro composite is set up just pretty much like any other volume profile that I have, except for the fact of when I get down to a couple of settings. One is I highlight the value area high and low only. I have that checked, and then I color code the volume based on percentage of the point of control. Okay, that right there, this setting is what gives it the heat map type of look that it has here. And that's something that I like just when I'm looking at a composite. It helps it kind of separate it out so that all my profiles don't look exactly the same. And I find that this is a nice way of just translating the information, because a big thing I'm looking at here are high and low volume areas. So I find that the heat map makes it a nice way to look at it. Okay, but I'll keep this micro composite typically on my 15-minute chart. So this 15-minute time frame here, all of these bars are 15 minutes. This is a little bit more of a zoomed out chart for me, and that's where I'll be keeping my micro composite, and that's how I build that out. Okay, the last kind of composite that I want to talk to you about, we've already looked at the intraday, we've looked at the micro composite, and now I want to just talk to you about the composite profile. This is really the third profile that I use, and that's what we're seeing right here on this side. That's very jagged and it's very large. This composite profile will bring in months, or a lot of times years worth of data. So I'm going back, I keep this on a daily time frame. Each one of these bars represent a full day, a full session from the beginning to the end. I don't include any overnight sessions on this chart. And what I'll do for this is I bring in this year's worth of data in most cases. Right now, this one's going back to about 2016. And what I'm bringing in here is all of that action, and I'm putting a profile around it. Now, what I'm using on this, I keep this on my daily chart only, and I'm really paying attention to the high and low volume areas here. This is where I'm getting a lot of the key levels that I lean against and that I trade against. Most of my high quality levels are coming from this composite chart. All of these key levels, the ones that are at least in proximity to being potentially traded that day, this information gets copied over to my other charts. It's actually here as well. So all of those levels get copied over. And if you ever see on my chart something like this, an LVN or an HVN, these levels come from my composite, from that daily chart. I just have them copied over. And so if I'm doing something like this where price is getting down, I'm looking to get long, I'm leaning against a key level, that key level comes from the composite profile. Okay, so that's kind of how I have that set up. And I don't really have this, I have it on my chart, but it's not something I look at all during the day. But for my prep and for certain times, I want to pop this up and take a look at it. If I'm not using it actively, it's just minimized, and it's not something I watch every day as far as the composite profile goes from. Okay, now this is how I have my charts set up, and these are the three profiles that I'm really using. You can see the different settings that I have on them, so if you'd like, you can set them up exactly the way that I have them. I've gone through a process, and I used to just give away my chart definitions where you could just copy them over and have exactly what I have. I've changed my chart setup a little bit, and I've included some information on these charts that I can't just give away, that have to be reserved for clients. So I'm not providing the chart definitions anymore, but walking you through and seeing exactly how I have these set up, especially if you're using Sierra, you should be able just to replicate this, even if it is a little bit more manual. As I'm saying that out loud, I don't know why I didn't think about this, but you guys can let me know if there is interest in having my exact chart definitions. what I can do is set up a template, taking away some of the things I can't share, and just including the way I have my trigger chart set up with the micro or the intraday, having my 15 minutes set up with the micro, and having my daily set up with the composite profile. I can kind of just chunk that out, and I don't know why I didn't prepare that in advance. As I was saying it out loud, it just hit me that I should have done that. So if there is interest, you guys can just let me know in the comments, or let me know somewhere that you'd like that. And what I can do is create another short video, and in that video I'll just include kind of a template where I've broken down. There will be some things missing, but I will include the things we've talked about today, which would be fairly easy for me. Okay, so you guys can let me know. And as you're looking at this, and if you're trying to learn about the profile, and what we're talking about today, if this is just kind of part of you picking up little pieces, and you really want to take this deeper and understand more about it, I would definitely recommend checking out the volume profiling method. This is what I have to offer, and I would love to work with you as a client if this is a good fit for you and something that makes sense. In the description, there's always an access and kind of some direction if you want to learn more about what exactly it is that the profiling method is all about, and even ways to get in contact with us to just have your questions answered, and to see if this is something you should be doing, and if pairing up with us would be a good move for you or not. All of that will be available if you'd like to check that out, okay? For everybody else, I hope that this was informative, and I hope that this just cleared up kind of the main things that I'm using, even though it was high level. I hope that it helped and you got something out of this. To all of the regulars, thanks for hanging out with me. If this is your first time on the channel, or if for some reason you haven't hit the subscribe button, I hope that if you like what you hear, you stick around and hit the subscribe button, sticking with the channel, sticking with all of us. Let's all hit the like button on the way out. If you're going to be on the screens between now and the next time I see you, I wish you a very happy trade. Watch your risk, and I'll see you guys in the next